In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast. My name's Ben Grant, joined as always by JB. You can find me at Ben_Grant. You can find JB at X's and Argos JB. And of course, you can find all of our stuff at xsandargos.com. It was a difficult week in the CFL this week because we lost someone that is very special to, I think, all CFL fans and certainly all CFL players, and everyone involved in the league in some way was undoubtedly affected when we unfortunately lost Chris Schultz this week at the age of 61. And JB, I just wanted to take a minute to start the show to reflect on, I guess, just what a big loss this is and the magnitude of it, which it didn't surprise me in one sense. You know, on Friday when this all started coming out and you started seeing the name Schultz and Chris Schultz everywhere, and, you know, you have flags lowered to half-mast in Toronto, it didn't surprise me, and yet it did in a way too. And I don't know if I know how to explain that.
Well, he was the face of the league's television, you know, for a long time. I think in recent years he had sort of moved on to some different things. You know, for a good portion of time, when you thought of CFL broadcast, you thought Chris Schultz.
There's some amazing stuff out there, and I really encourage you to read and watch some of the pieces that people that were really close to him have produced, and very painfully so over the last few days because it's been such a difficult thing. Mike Hogan immediately comes to mind. He wrote a piece that you can find on argonauts.ca that it's highly emotional, but it's such a wonderful tribute to Chris. And of course, they were very close. They worked together for a long time. And, you know, Hogan again appeared Monday morning on the CFP podcast, the A Block, and did an interview there. And it's so tough to listen to because he's really emotional about it. And yet it's wonderful to hear, and to hear that sort of sincerity in his voice, and the stories that he tells are wonderful. And if you haven't had a chance to hear that interview or to read Mike's piece on argonauts.ca, please go and do that. Do yourself a favor, because it's memories like this and stories like this that people who have worked with him can tell that are going to keep the memory of Chris Schultz alive, because he affected everybody in the CFL in one way or another. And myself, you know, I didn't know Chris. I met him on a handful of occasions, and yet even so, he had an impact on me. I still remember the very first interaction I had, and, you know, we might have met 5 or 6 times. And while I may have muddled up the years and I don't quite remember the exact scenarios, I do remember those interactions because they were all special in their own way. Back in the early 2000s, there were 2 years where I was working for the Argonauts doing spotting. So basically I was in the press box for home games, and I had a headset on. I was sitting in the front row of the press box, and I was spotting down in distance where the ball was, and I was relaying that to the Jumbotron crew who could put it up as quickly as possible. And then I'd go on to cover the Argonauts for chorus for one extra year after that. So between those 3 years in the press box for Argos games are where all my interactions with Chris occurred. And I remember the first time I met him, I was standing in line behind him in the buffet that they had for, I think, only one of those 3 years. And I remember just feeling so tiny because he was such a presence, such a large man. And I really wanted to introduce myself because I knew full well who he was. And it was really important to me that I at least said hello. So I introduced myself, and I wasn't prepared for the handshake that was coming. It was something that knocked me off my feet, is usually an expression, and it came very close to that. And it wasn't so much that his hand was 5 times the size of mine, which it was, or that his grip strength was more strength than I had in my entire body. It was that he came at my hand with the aggression of a rugby scrum. and and it just about knocked my whole body off center because I wasn't ready for it. And every subsequent meeting I had with him, I was bracing myself for the handshake. But it was there was such sincerity and such a genuine pleased to meet you, and the eye contact and the energy that he had with everything that he did. It was wonderful, and that was my first impression of him. And the times after that, where again he didn't have to give me the time of day, and yet he did. He sat on a couple of occasions. Once we talked about why you would pull guards on play action, the effectiveness of trap blocking using a fullback, and he was just such a fan of the game of football, and he was excited to talk to anyone that would talk football with him. And I was only too happy to do so because I looked up to him, and I thought he was such an amazing player. And he just started into broadcasting as well. So I look back very fondly on those opportunities. I feel very blessed to have at least had the chance to meet him, even though I obviously didn't get to know him very well. But those memories will always stick with me, the sincerity of the handshake and the light that went on in his eyes when you were ready to talk about the game that he loves so much. So it's a really sad week, and such a big loss for the CFL and for football in Canada. But I think the one thing you can take away from it is there's no question about the degree to which he impacted the game and Canadian football here. And you see it on social media, you see it on websites, on radio shows, on TV stations. He impacted everybody that watches football in this country, and he's remembered very fondly by everyone that got to know him. Now, moving on to football, which is difficult after that. We have some things that are continuing on in the world of the Toronto Argonauts, and it did seem, it seemed like everything is kind of ground to a halt for a few days, and I think appropriately so. But we did get a little bit of news out of Enoch Muamba, who I know, JB, we've been on Enoch Muamba watch for, I think, 4 weeks now. And there wasn't movement this week, but there was a story on 3 Down. And we were reminded of the fact that the last time Muamba was a free agent, it took him a couple months to decide on a team. So maybe we shouldn't have our weekly Enoch Muamba watch anymore and should play it a little bit more cool. What do you think?
Well, I think that we should still continue to light the fires for him. I think he would be a fantastic addition. I mean, you want to talk about me changing my prediction for the Argos winning record. I mean, that would change my prediction. I think if they added him to their linebacking core, I think you're looking at a borderline elite defense. And I think when you add that to the offense, we've talked, there are a lot of ifs and maybes and scratch cards. But I think that he would be, we know who he is. He's not a shot in the dark or a roll of the dice. I think that the more guys that they can sign who are load-bearing walls, if I can continue my metaphors, is huge. I mean, I think to add him as a known quantity to the defense would really make all of the long shot signings seem even better if they complemented, rock solid CFL additions. So I'm really hoping. I mean, I think that would be the signing of the offseason if we were able to steal him from Montreal, who, I'm not entirely sure what their plan is, but it doesn't look like their plan is to compete for the Grey Cup.
Well, it certainly doesn't look like their plan is to re-sign him. I mean, he's all but said it's he's not going back to Montreal because he wanted to. He said he wanted to go back to Montreal. He loved the team, loved the city, really hoped it could happen, but then was reminded of the fact that when GMs change, if you're not this GM's guy, then maybe you're not going to be asked to stick around as long as you might have otherwise. And I thought that was sort of interesting because he got into a conversation about potentially becoming a GM. He said that was an ambition of his down the road, maybe one day becoming a CFL general manager, and he found it fascinating to think of his own situation as a GM, like from a general manager's point of view. And he didn't find it offensive or insulting or anything like that. He just thought it's an interesting business. And he's looking at this basically as a businessman, which I thought was kind of cool. But then I was also thinking, if you want to be a GM in the CFL, what better guy to learn from than Pinball Clemens? And wouldn't this be a great relationship? I still feel like it's destined to happen. And then get to the football side of it. And you're talking about how this is, I guess, a tangible signing, right? Because as you said, we've got so many pieces that we think they're going to be good players, but you just don't know. We know what he is. We know what Cameron Judge is. We know suddenly we'd have two linebackers out there that you can immediately quantify. We know what these guys are as CFL players. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. And to be honest, most of the defenses like that, there aren't as many question marks as there are in the offense. But yeah, I think that would be cool. Now, just for the record, what would you say the Argonauts' regular season record would be with Enoch Muamba under contract? Are you willing to put a number out there?
With our imaginary 18-game season?
Yeah, with assuming that we actually had an 18-game season, which I realize we all believe will not happen at this point. But if there were 18 games, how are the Argos doing?
I would have them at 11 wins.
It's still pretty conservative in my view.
No, it's not. You have to remember how poor they were. I think an improvement to 11 wins would be absolutely spectacular.
But that team's gone. They're all gone. There's like 3 guys that are left, and those are the good ones.
You can't, I don't want to. All right, fine. You want the wet blanket of truth. Football teams, it's not a basketball team where you can just sign 4 dudes and you're ready to roll. Football teams are such a huge group of men that take time to learn plays and systems and where the other player is going to be. It's one of those things where consistency is really huge. Like, you look at teams that win, they don't have huge turnover because it's a sport that is really so reliant upon guys knowing what the other guy's going to do, guys knowing the system, guys being able to play within it. It's not a sport that lends itself to cherry picking a bunch of guys and throwing them together. And I am fully in support of the Argos shooting their shot with all these guys, but I think that there's a long history of teams being put together like this that didn't really click. So I still think that, I still think that that's a very generous. I think the Argos will win 11 games. I mean, that's great. I think, when was the last time the Argos won 11 games?
Well, usually we win Grey Cups with 9 or 10 wins, so it's sort of a harder thing to quantify in terms of the Toronto Argonauts. So I don't know if... I guess I'll accept that. From you, 11 wins is like me predicting a Grey Cup win, I suppose. So that's going to have to do for me.
2013, the Argos won 11.
That's been a while, I guess.
Yeah. So I think that...
It's misleading, though. We've had some good teams in there, but just we've lost games to injury. We've had 10 wins a couple of times, too, but...
We have not won more than 11 since 1997.
It's tough to do. We haven't had any of those juggernaut teams.
Oh, you're the one predicting 14 wins.
In a long time. Well, that's why it's so exciting to have this group here. Mm-hmm. I know. I agree that my predictions probably aren't as tempered as yours, maybe as realistic of yours. I certainly let the fan in me take over when it comes to prediction time. I don't know that I'd necessarily be walking up to the mutuals at the MGM Grand with this much confidence, but
my biggest question is Dinwiddie. He has not been a head coach before, and I just think it's going to be such a challenge to rein this thing in. I really hope that he is an elite coaching talent, because I think if he's not, I think that the wheels will come off pretty quickly.
I think there's I think that's a legitimate concern. I think there's even more concern when you weigh the fact that his coordinators are also very new at their jobs. They just don't have a lot of time there doing those jobs. And you really do need all three of them to work if this team is going to win. And so it is a risk. We don't have proven commodities on the coaching staff. And so, like you were saying before, with the lottery tickets that this team has, there are also some lottery tickets among the coaching staff.
I think he clearly seems like a very nice guy and a very bright guy. I would say this about any first-time coach. I think that I would feel more comfortable with this group being put together with a veteran hand running the show, because I do think this is going to be a group of personalities and a group of talent that are going to be very demanding. You know, this is not a team filled with 25-year-olds. There's a lot of grown men on this team who will have pretty firm ideas about how they want things to go. And if those ideas differ with the coaching staff better prove pretty quickly that they know what they're talking about and that they're able to put the players in a position to win. I think that's the crucial thing, is they can get the buy-in from the players if they show that they know what they're talking about. But they have so little benefit of the doubt. You know, they don't have a lot of things to kind of lean back on, that I think the testing portion is going to be very quick for this staff with the roster that they're going to need to. You know, unfortunately, I think they're going to need to come out relatively fast. You know, I think that this is a team that they're building that's going to need to look competitive very quickly to get that buy-in. So I am nervous about that, but that's for another day.
I was surprised to find, I decided to look up the other day the age of the Toronto roster, because we think of them as quite old. And while that's not necessarily wrong, the math doesn't hold up as a whole team. But I think it's a bit misleading too. So the average age of Toronto players, I think it was 26.7 years of age, which I was surprised at. I thought that's a lot younger than I would have thought. I thought our average age was going to be pretty close to 30. There is a little bit of a difference there, but there are positional groups that are younger. There's some youth on the offensive line, for example. They could, in theory, go with a young group of DBs or even a young group of receivers, although I don't think it's necessarily going to work out that way. But there is some youth on this team. But you're right in that this is an experienced group. These are a lot of people that have decided we're going to take this maybe one last shot, maybe two last shots at winning a Grey Cup. And we've decided to do it here in Toronto. And if they feel like they're being held back, like you say, it could be a problem. But again, like you say, maybe we can get into this more in depth another day. But it's going to be interesting. I think there's a ton of pressure on Coach Dinwiddie and his staff.
Which is really unfortunate for him, because normally if you're a young coach and you get hired to a terrible team, a team coming off a terrible season, you get to, rebuild. That's the advantage of, you're a young coach and you're inexperienced, but this team was no good. And so people are going to give you some leeway as you try and create a team that is competitive. And unfortunately, they have kind of changed course and have decided to try and make the team good right away. And so it's not really, I don't think they would have hired him for this roster. If this was the roster, I think they hire somebody else. The expectations are now raised, and he doesn't kind of get that year of being a first-year head coach. So he has more talent than he would have, but I do think it's I think it's a bit of a tough break for him that he didn't get a year last year to kind of figure out who he is as a coach and figure out what they were doing.
All right, let's move on. I'm curious to hear your notes on my receiver piece. And just to refresh your memory, just in case you don't have copious pages of notes in front of you with footnotes and research and all sorts, I decided that what probably results from this 20 plus group of receivers in what might end up being like a week of camp, who knows? I decided that we're going to end up with DeVaris Daniels and Eric Rogers on the boundary. And then to the field, you'll have Kendall Wright to the inside, Juwan Brescison in that Y spot, and Dejan Brissett to the sideline on the field side, something like that. I decided it could be Brissett. It's probably going to be a Canadian receiver over there, but I think Brissett's probably where I'm leaning. So those were sort of my 5 guys. Your thoughts? I'd love to hear them.
I agreed that I would not immediately crown Bryant as the go-to at the X position. It's going to be... I agree with your take, too, that that's really what he's built for, that he's not a multi-purpose, multi-dimensional receiver. I think that he is a very good X. He is sort of the prototypical X. And I do believe that he will be given every opportunity to keep that X. I don't think he's going to be played out of that X unless...
But you've got such a sure thing in DeVaris Daniels. Like, Daniels is so... He's proven. And I know he's had trouble staying healthy. He hasn't logged a lot of full seasons. Actually, I'm not sure he's ever logged any full season. He's had injuries. But when he's healthy, he's among the best X receivers in the league. And I know he's played elsewhere too, and he is flexible. So maybe in your line of thinking, if Bryant does perform at a high level, they want to keep him. X really is the only spot for him, but DeVaris can play elsewhere. And so maybe then he probably gets bumped to the field side in that case, because I still think Rogers is going to end up being the boundary slot. So maybe that's what happens if Bryant plays well. I just think I think it's a tough ask. I think the more I thought about it, I'm really excited about Bryant coming in. There's no doubt that he has the potential to once again be a star, because he was that in the NFL. I just think there are so many guys that have tried and failed to convert from NFL to CFL. And we've talked about that in weeks past. I think until I see it, I'm just going to assume that Daniels wins the X. And if Bryant proves me wrong, well, great. That's awesome. I'm excited for that. I'm pulling for that. I just don't think it's something I would bet on.
It's an interesting scenario looking at it from a coach's perspective, which I'm always fascinated by. Players will be looking to see how truthful is this coach? If they talk about it being a meritocracy, will it be a true competition at X, or does their franchise have the thumb on the scale? And, if Bryant is outplayed, will he be replaced at X? And what does that create in Bryant? Where, how happy will he be to be on the bench? I think that those are real quandaries for the coaching staff. I think that's one of the disadvantages of having so many players who could potentially be great. It's not as easy. It's not Madden. You just delete a guy and put a new guy in. You have personalities and dynamics, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he handles that, because he clearly is going to like Daniels. Daniels is going to be his guy from Calgary. Does he have the ability? How much is the franchise going to push Bryant as the starting X? I'm really curious to see that.
What do you think about the philosophy of getting your best 5 guys on the field and figuring out a place for that? Now, I know it's a little different in the CFL because you have to also take into account who's Canadian and who's not. And I know we may be in a position where your passport doesn't necessarily dictate that this year, especially if they're able to sign a guy like Muamba, where we've got an extra Canadian in the linebacking core. But assuming it weren't an issue, assuming that you didn't have to think about who's Canadian and who's not, Do you agree that you should get your best 5 guys out there and just figure it out? Or do you think you have to field for the position?
Yeah, I'm more of in line with the thinking of looking at the wide receiver core as a basketball team. And, I know basketball has been sort of transitioning to positionless squads, but largely in basketball, you still have your 1 through 5. And, you have your point guard, and you have your center, and you have your small forward, and you have your power forward. And I'm more in that line that, you have complementary receivers who each have the skill set at their particular position, as opposed to just the best receivers. I don't see that. I think that receivers have positions. I do believe in that. I don't think you can just take a guy, and make him the X because you need to get your best 5 on there. I do think you still need to look at the positions as subsets of talents. So I don't think you just take your best 5 wide receivers. I think you do try and find a way to pick your 5 guys. Now, if you have 2 great guys at X, can you find a way to make if Daniels and Bryant, we have this riches, maybe, but I don't know. I do think each position really has its own skill set. I don't know how transferable everybody is.
There are a couple of positions that you can kind of play with. I think to the field side, it's a little bit more flexible. Like where I've got Johan Breskison penciled in as our Y or as our field 2, that's a place where some coaches have the philosophy of going with a guy like Breskison, who's big and tall, has got a great reach, can make plays downfield. But some teams go with the smaller, shiftier receiver like Hamilton, where they use Banks. There's 3 or 4 teams, I guess, in the CFL that have that philosophy of that's where you are going to put your guy that can make everyone miss. And you're looking to get the ball to him quickly. You're looking for slants. You're looking for receiver screens. Where's your take on that? Do you want speed and elusiveness there, or do you like the Breskison sort of Calgary approach of having a big tall guy out there?
I mean, with my other hat as a Patriot fan, look, I think the shifty speed make you miss receiver is preferable. I think that having I get the argument. With if you have the stronger possession receivers, you're able to stay on schedule and you're able to move down the field, and it's just a different philosophical offense, right? What are you looking to do? Are you looking to be a possession, sort of high percentage offense, or are you looking to be more like an American SEC air raid? Let's put 50 on them.
It's funny because that's when you say SEC. I think I'm old enough where that does not mean let's put 50 on them. To me, still to this day, when you say SEC, I think let's win 6-3. That's sort of my mentality. But you're right. That's what's happened.
I mean, football is definitely at the college level in the States. Let's put 50 on them. And so it is interesting. I don't think that philosophy has made its way into the CFL yet. Which is interesting because you would think that the CFL would have adapted to it faster than the NFL, but it's not the case. A lot of that sort of air raid, high scoring, Chip Kelly, no huddle, let's score as much as we can, has not taken off in the CFL.
There have been moments of it. There are teams that have certainly approached that, but you're right in that it hasn't increased over the last few years. We've been sitting sort of at 70% pass rate, which is high. But you don't have to convince me. Like, I actually think in the CFL, I think you can get away without running much at all. like you might remember, I spent an entire season with basically just a draw play and a quarterback sneak as running plays. So I'm a big fan of just having these teams go out there and throw, especially if they can. And in the CFL, the rules sort of dictate that you should. I'm fine with abandoning the run game altogether. But yeah, it hasn't quite happened. There still seems to be that reluctance to go all the way with it. And, why not send out a 6-wide unit as your base? Send your best 6 receivers out there and see what you can do. I'm surprised there hasn't been a team that has really gone to town with that, or at least tried it out for a full season. But I get why they're scared. It would be a big risk. You're putting your reputation on the line, because if it doesn't work, you may never get a job again.
Yeah, I wonder what the mindset is. I wonder if coaches in the CFL are so cognizant of not wanting to seem like the arena league, that we're just out here, we're playing football here, we're playing real football. We're not playing some sort of video game version of it. Because I think that, coaches are, have lots of ego and talk to lots of Americans and know how they're perceived. And I do wonder if that pushes back on the adventurousness that should be in the CFL, because coaches are so keen to be seen as, old time traditional football, that the Canadian Football League is not some sort of XFL, arena football version of football, and I do wonder if that is preventing the CFL from really being more adventurous, because who has been adventurous? We talked about Dinwiddie. I mean, I hope he's adventurous. That's what I want. I don't want him to come in and run, the same CFL offense that we've seen so many times. I mean, I want him to come in and, innovate. I want to see things that are new. I want the CFL McVay. I want the CFL, Kyle Shanahan. That's what I want. I don't want the CFL Schottenheimer.
I think you might be disappointed in this case, because I don't think there's any chance Dinwiddie's coming in and running anything other than what Calgary ran 2 years ago. So I think you were going to see, and it's a fine offense. I quite like the Calgary system, but that's not what you're talking about.
I don't know why the league is so scared of trying to, change it up and somebody come up here and just try and blow the doors off people. I mean, lots of American coaches who are, big time famous, have given over to it, are no longer embarrassed by, running offenses where the quarterback doesn't know anything, and they're just out there daring teams to stop them. I
think we've seen experiments fail with the Argonauts. Of course, I think everybody remembers the horrible experiment that's, it's like 20 years ago, more than that now, where we tried to just pound the ball down everybody's throats running double tight when the rest of the CFL wasn't going anywhere near that.
I mean, that's the opposite of what I'm talking about.
No, but it's the same. It's the idea of doing something that no one else is doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's like driving your car in reverse down the highway. Yes, nobody else is doing it, but I'm talking about doing something nobody else is doing that seems interesting.
Well, that was interesting.
Yeah.
I think there's a fear, just like we saw with that Argonauts John Heward team. I think he was only with the team for that one season. I don't think he even made it through the whole season. But running that system and I know it's not what you're looking for, but the idea of doing something entirely different. Well, he did that. That was Albrecht's idea. We're going to get out there. We're going to pound the football with 2 tight ends, load up the backfield. And it didn't work, and they got off to like a 1-5 or 1-6 start or something ridiculous like that. And he was out, and that was it. And the worry is, if you come in and you decide, I'm going to revolutionize things, I'm going to get out there, we're going to throw 70 passes, we're going to run twice, and it fails, then you may not be a head coach again. Then that may be the end of it. And so I think that's why you don't see anyone do it, because it's not like you can't run in the CFL. You can run quite effectively. So I think people are nervous about putting their jobs on the line to do something that no one else has done before, when if you do something that's proven, you can probably keep your job.
No, I think that's very true.
So speaking of strange football, XFL, Arena League, let's talk about Josh Gordon for a moment, the new star of the fan football league that it's such a weird version of football. I'm for any kind of football. I will watch any kind of football. I like the Arena League. I like the XFL. I like anything that involves a football, throwing, kicking, running with it. I'm a fan of. But this is a strange league. I don't know if you saw Josh Gordon catching 2 touchdowns for the Zappers or something like that. They were impressive catches. But now there are rumors about Josh Gordon potentially coming to Toronto. Is there room for him on this receiving core?
I do not think Josh Gordon is coming to Toronto. I don't know whether agents are throwing that around. It doesn't. I don't think it makes any sense. I mean, I like Josh Gordon. I'm all for Josh Gordon getting chances. I think that he's obviously faced a lot of challenges in his life, and he has some issues with addiction, and if coming to Toronto will help him, I'm for it. But I don't see the fit. So I would say no. I don't think so.
I'm intrigued by the fact that he's a player you can kind of put anywhere. Like, I know in the last 4 or 5 years when he's been on the field, he's been playing on the outside. But let's not forget, early in his career, he was a slot back. He has the ability to play inside. He did very well in his first few seasons, largely playing out of the slot. And it wasn't into those last few years where he's been outside more than inside. But he's still seen a fair number of snaps from slot position. So he can do whatever you need him to do. And I think that's, if you're looking for somebody as insurance, just in case maybe Kendall Wright isn't what you hope he's going to be, then why can't Josh Gordon play in that same spot? And I think that the rumors come from the fact that, well, the Argos hold his rights. So if he is going to come to the CFL, it has to be with the Argos. And if he's willing to play in the fan-controlled football league, then why wouldn't he be willing to play in the CFL? And so the question then is, are the Argos willing to have yet another big-name, controversial receiver and controversial signing for that matter? Because imagine how everyone's going to go bananas about the Argos and their salary cap if Josh Gordon comes in. So, but that's the question. Do the Argos want Josh Gordon, I think, is more the question than anything else.
He is an elite receiver. Or he was, I mean, I would say, having watched him, I guess it depends on speed. I mean, he definitely, was not able to get open a lot toward the end of his NFL career. That he simply wasn't able to detach himself. He still has terrific hands, and he would be a formidable possession receiver. I think he'd be a fantastic red zone target. But again, I don't know. I just don't know how many random guys you can bring in and put together. I mean, I think at a certain point, you have too many. There's sort of a weight, an atomic weight to how many you can have. I think in terms of these lottery tickets, I don't think I'm a no on Josh Gordon. But we'll see.
I'm a yes only because I don't have to coach these guys. And so I'm all for the chaos of it. Like, sure, bring him in, see what he can do. And if you have forgotten what Josh Gordon can do, go take a look on YouTube for his 2 touchdown catches this past weekend for the Zappers. Both are sensational catches. And he's not open. And you're right, there isn't separation. He's standing, especially on the last one, where he's just crowded around by a ton of guys. And yet he's got the hand strength and the hand eye to be able to somehow make a catch. And make the play.
I think he'd be a fantastic red zone target. But...
And you combine it with all the other red zone targets we have. Like, Eric Rogers is an amazing red zone target. Daniels, Breskeson, those guys are awesome there. And we haven't even got to really see Dejan Brissett do anything. But you look at his film from Richmond, And he was sensational in the red zone. A jump ball for him with his basketball background, his vertical, his timing. You can just throw it up with 5 guys like that down in the end zone running around. It's going to make things easy for Arbuckle. But I agree. I think there's probably a limit to it. I'm cheering for it because, again, it's the fan in me maybe speaking out. But you're probably right in that we may have reached our threshold here for how many lottery tickets you can bring into one positional group.
Yeah, but look, I'm pro Josh Gordon as a person, and so if this is a positive step for him, then I guess I will get behind it too.
Well, that will just about do it for us on the X's and Argos podcast. If you haven't already done so, please take a moment to rate, review, subscribe so it shows up right there on your phone. For JB, I'm Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.